going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our twice-weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this time, we are back with more of the Brothers War main stories slash the past versions of the stories, with episode 4, The Ink of Empires by Miguel Lopez. My quick review at the top of this one is, this one was great, but you need to be okay with being really depressed first, and then you'll get to the good stuff. That's my quick review. Be ready for sad and depressing, and then stick around for really, really good as it goes on.
Yeah, my quick review is good writing, way too long.
Fair.
Definitely should have been 2 stories. Sad, but also gross a lot of times too.
Fair.
But then cool. So.
Okay.
It's a good story.
Yeah. So, if that convinces you to go check out the story for yourself, if you have not done so already, or if you want a refresher, it's kind of been a bit since the story came out, not a lot, but a bit. The top link in the description down below will take you to the story so that you can read it for yourself. And then obviously, if you do leave to go read that story, we would love it if you would come back here and join us, because we want to hear from you. Compare your opinions to ours. Contrast your opinions from ours. Let us know about things that you liked that we didn't talk about, that you disliked that we didn't talk about. Whatever the case may be, that's what the comment section down below is for. We want to keep that conversation going, so definitely let us know your thoughts. That's what it is there for. Before we get into the full review itself, I did want to say, first of all, hi, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this video the day it comes out, which is Thursday, we are streaming, like right now, on this channel. So if you go to the main channel page for this channel, you'll find it. You should be able to just click the logo or the name of the channel right down underneath this video. We are streaming the Brothers War Early Access event live, sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. So thank you to them for sponsoring us. If you want to see kind of the first opportunity besides the pre-release where you can see these cards played, so I guess the first time you can see these cards played digitally for the Brothers War, you definitely are going to want to come check it out. And then if you miss it live, if you're watching this after the fact, the VOD is still up on the channel if that's something you're interested in. There are going to be 12 hours of content. I do not expect any single human being to watch all 12 hours. Trust me. Only we are crazy enough to be there for all 12 hours. But I encourage you to go check it out, because it is always an amazing time. Obviously, because I said that when this video comes out, we will be actively doing it. We haven't done it yet, but we always have an amazing time. It's great to be sponsored by Wizards and to play against other great content creators as well. And we will be playing Limited all day long. That is sealed and draft. So if you are looking for Constructed, there are plenty of other amazing streamers that will be doing that, and I encourage you to go check them out. But we will be doing sealed and draft all day, and we would love it, love it, love it if you would join us and pop into chat, say hi, let us know how you're doing, etc., and what you think of the new set. We would love to have you. In addition to that, don't forget we have other channels, links down in the description box below for Video Games for All, Gluten Free for All, you know all that stuff. Like I said, come join us on stream, talk to us, we'll let you know about any other things that we have going on. And while you are here, please don't forget, especially so that you will be reminded of when more videos come out, to subscribe and ring that bell so that you will get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, or whenever we go live, typically every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, although this Friday not live because we will be at the pre-release, so stay tuned for those videos that will be coming out. We'll be opening product and checking out what other people open at a pre-release itself for our sponsor store, Champion Card Collector in Poughkeepsie, New York. So definitely come back and check that out. Their logo up there. So thank you so much for bearing with us for that, because yes, now it is time to be on to the full review itself. So we are at 44 AR. In the last main story that we reviewed, because the last story that we reviewed was a side story, but the last main story that we reviewed was in 28 AR, which was 16 years before this story, and the first story that we read and the second story that we read of the main stories was from 69 AR, which is 25 years from now for when this story is set. So just to give you a general context, it's almost halfway through, not quite, but we have talked a lot in these stories about hearing that war is bad. We didn't need to hear that, we know that, but these stories are putting forth that information for you, right? That's how it's being written. It's been great how it's been written so far, and this story did not disappoint either. But as we said at the beginning of this story, I mean, you have soldiers in a trench. It ain't pretty, it ain't fancy, there's not really fantasy elements here of like, here's how we use magic to make living in a trench easier. No. Every second of it sounds terrible. It sucks. It's hell. Like,
they didn't talk about trench foot, which I was expecting.
Okay. Sure.
So,
good point.
It could have been worse.
I will say, you know, I wrote some of the, like, you know, bad stuff down, so bear with me. But yeah, like, it starts talking about him making a fire out of broken arrows, packing material from, I guess, their supplies that they are unpacking so that they can use them while in the trench, and or put them into their packs to like carry them around with them and stuff. And they're using that to make a fire to heat frozen stew. Now, I know how we here in modern day would have frozen material that far out into a war zone, like dry ice or whatever the case may be. I don't fully know how they would do it. Again, I guess maybe magic is the answer. I'm not exactly sure.
Or the cold.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he did say it was cold, but like that they could see their breath and they had cloaks and stuff. So yeah, that's a good point.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that because he mentioned it was frozen, so I thought like really frozen as opposed to like, you know,
well, he said it became like a slurry, basically.
Once he heated it, but there was a fire. That's what, you know what I mean? Like, so it was over a fire until he, you know, so he was able to mix it up or whatever. But regardless, that's actually a really good point. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Thank you.
Whatever.
But, so we hear about that, and then...
But yeah, if they could keep it frozen somehow, then they would want to.
Absolutely, they should.
To, you know, actually preserve the...
freshness of
the
materials.
You're welcome. What the heck am I trying to say here?
I got you. Yeah, and so like they, you know, he uses his brass cup, which he probably uses for everything, for drinks, for food, for whatever. And then he used his knife, he said, to like stir it up and like break it apart when it was frozen. That tracks with real life. I have heard stories from my grandfather that when he, or I guess his brothers or whatever, were in tanks, and you would have to stay in the tank because the tank is fortified, but the second you get out of there, it's not. What he said to me, and I'll be as polite as possible, was they used their helmets for everything. Eating, shaving, bedpan, whatever you might want to call it, they used their helmets for it. So repurposing their cup as a thing to hold stew in, and it's for drinking out of. You use your knife to kill things, or cut open packages, or stir your food. Like, whatever you have, you use it for any use that it could possibly be used for, and try not to think too hard about whether that is sanitary or not, or whether that makes sense or not. Because you don't really have much choice. You're in a trench. So... yeah, it's disgusting, like Amy said. Really gross. But, reality. Yeah. Actually what happens. Like, it's what you have to do. There's no, you know, they're not coming around with little, like, cellophane packets with a fork, a knife, and a spoon and a napkin in it for you to unwrap at every meal. Like, you use what you've got. And so, you do the best you can. And then... he's also fighting off rats in the process of eating his food. Because there are rats coming, and he said the rats rule the trench, or own the trench.
Right. Well, kind of to speak to what you said a minute ago, he did say, like, when they made the stew, he was like, it's chicken, not rat meat.
That was the bones for the stew
right.
that he had were chicken bones, not rat bones. And
right.
and the sergeant that he was talking to was like
impressed.
Very impressed.
Like, where'd you find a chicken? You know,
yep.
and but
and then he stashed the bones in his pocket afterwards. So again, giving you an idea of cleanliness,
yeah.
like
right.
he just put the bones back in his pocket so that the next time he made stew, he still had those valuable chicken bones.
Ugh. But yeah, like, I mean, think about it. If you're eating rats, right, it probably doesn't matter so much that you're eating out of the same thing you're, you know, going to the bathroom in.
Yep.
Because rats probably have more diseases than you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you rinse it out with water, it's probably fine, right?
No.
No.
It's really not.
No, it's not. There's not, you know, I mean, even if there was hand sanitizer, you probably don't want to be eating hand sanitizer either, but regardless, like, no.
But there definitely isn't.
No. No, you're lucky if there's water that's not, like, from a mud puddle, that you're just, like, swishing it in, because you're like, yeah,
that's
whatever.
way cleaner than your bedpan helmet.
Yep.
That you're eating out of.
Yep.
But it's also a lot cleaner than those rats. So.
I mean, you cook it first, it's fine, right?
No.
I know it's not.
Unfortunately, it's not.
I know.
Because, like, the meats that are mass-produced and that we actually eat and are supposed to eat and are okay with eating, you can say, well, okay, the bacteria is going to cook out when I cook this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll make this chicken. If it's not cooked all the way, it's going to have salmonella potentially,
Fair.
right? Or
yep. Mm-hmm.
this ground beef might have E. coli in it, so I'm going to cook it all the way. Okay, both of those things might be present in fecal matter, but rats have diseases, not, you know, just like bacteria that needs to be killed off, because bacteria lives in, you know, the air and on surfaces and whatever. But they have like things that will actually harm you, whether you cook them or not. So
yeah. It talks about the fact that they are moving from trench to trench, basically, in their advance or falling back during this war and the fighting with going through no man's land to get to the next trench or whatever and try to overtake that one. And he mentions how each trench that they get to is worse than the last because they're getting older. And so the older the trench is, the crappier it is, because either they've learned as they progressed of how to make the trenches better, and or because they've been used more, they have fallen into further disrepair because they're crappier, or they've been bombed more, or they've been fallen into and crawled out of more times, and so it's starting to deteriorate.
They've been rained in more.
Yep.
You know, I assume when you build a trench that you also build some kind of a makeshift drainage system, or attempt to.
He did say that there were planks on the ground and that the floor was muddy, but that you tried to walk on the planks to minimize how much mud you walked in, but that even the officers who were in like pristine outfits still had muddy boots.
Right.
So even the people who literally just showed up to show their faces and then leave and not do anything of consequence, we'll get more to that in a minute, even they had muddy boots just from walking in these trenches. Right. So you can only do so much.
Right. But yeah, I mean, a trench is made out of dirt, basically.
Yep.
You know, maybe these trenches were a little bit different because
he said there was like some wood in like the bunk areas or the cubbies that they dug for themselves, but they dug it in wood, and then they laid like burlap down on the bottom so that you're not laying on just planks of wood. Like you have something cushioning you, but yes, it's all in dirt.
Right. So dirt rinses away when it rains.
No, erosion's not real.
So the older the trench, the worse it is because it's falling in on itself.
Yep.
Instead of being this perfectly dug hole, it's now this like shorter walled, filled in mud pile.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they talked about like, you know, getting into a trench, you have to like bail it out, you know, and then dig and bail it out and dig and all that. So yeah, I mean, they talk about that for sure, for how to make them or fix them up when you get into a new one.
Yeah.
So they even talk about a couple of times at the beginning, they talk about Farid and Karak are the first two that we meet who are like bunkmates, if you will, essentially, and are part of the same regiment. And Farid talks about, or every time Farid and Karak have to get up, even just that, I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Because they're like sitting there or laying down, but like, oh, a captain is coming, or hey, you have reinforcements or new recruits or whatever. And so they tell them about that, and they have to like get up off the ground, and it talks about like how they strain to do that, and like Karak is got this like wet cough because he's sick, and Farid had that a little while ago, but now Karak has it. So like, I felt bad for them just for when they had to stand up from their seated or laying position, let alone the fact that they're fighting in a war. Like, you know, it's not just that, but it just, even just the act of standing sounded like torture from the way that they were describing it. So, again, well done, but more nonsense on top of the pile. They mentioned that the new replacements that they did bring in didn't even have helmets. They had, like, fabric or canvas headgear. So, you're not...
what was the point?
But they said, oh, it's likely because, right, Farid thought to himself, it's likely because they needed the metal for the automatons. And so they didn't give the metal to the soldiers anymore to protect, you know, their heads. They saved it to use to make robots, and yet then did not cease using soldiers.
Right. They didn't say, okay, so we can, you know, we can use all the metal that we would put as armor on a soldier to make an automaton, so that therefore that automaton would replace that soldier.
Nope.
They still sent soldiers that just didn't have helmets.
Yep, because it was more important to give it to the robots.
Yep.
That's another, like I said, that's something else that we'll talk about with this story, because they do mention it.
Yeah, there's an actual line.
Yeah. So then we find out about their sleeping arrangements. I mentioned that they're little cubbies dug into the wall, and that they're like padded or whatever in whatever capacity they can. When the reinforcements come, Farid has to point out to them, like, you know, grab a bunk, and they go into the bunks, and Farid said those bunks belonged to soldiers who went over the wall, and they never saw them again. They're not fresh new bunks for fresh new recruits. No, those are used bunks from people that went over the wall and are almost certainly dead now. Maybe they've been kidnapped and are prisoners of war, but they're dead now. And Farid talked about how, like, when you get into a new cubby, you check and see what things might have been left there by the last person who stayed, because maybe they're valuable things. And so you can go to the quartermaster and trade it for cigarettes or wine. Because that is what these soldiers become when they die. Their things get used by other soldiers to trade for cigarettes and wine. their personal effects, their things that they had with them for maybe morale boosting, maybe.
Yep.
Again,
and morale boosting in war is something that helps you survive.
yes, super important, yeah. But still, like I said, at the beginning here, real depressing
Yeah.
this story. Not a lot of happiness and hope at the beginning of the story at all.
And I'll speak to the last thing you just said. I mean, I think I've spoken about this book a couple of times in JaAR's. Viktor Frankl's book, the meaning of life. I can't remember the name of it, but I've spoken about it in JaAR a couple of times, and it's basically just the book where he talks about living in concentration camps and how you are broken. You're stripped down to your absolute most naked self, right? They literally take every possession you have, including your clothes, right? They sanitize you essentially, and then they give you other clothes, so you don't even get like that bit of your identity back, right? And then you find ways to like give yourself hope to keep on surviving, but you always know when someone has lost all of their morale, as you put it, and are basically resigning themselves to death, because that is when they will stop eating food and they will start trading food for cigarettes so that they can smoke cigarettes and let themselves die.
Sure.
Basically.
Yeah. So, yeah, all great stuff so far in this story. Something that I noted that I feel like the story didn't as much harp on this, but I noticed the theme running through. Fareed is fighting in this war, and Fareed mentions that this war started either just before he was born or like when he was a baby. So like, Fareed doesn't have any stakes in this.
No.
At all.
Does anyone ever?
And that
There's a war.
And that is something that does get covered in this story. There's new recruits that are 14 and 15 some odd years old. And one of the 15-year-olds, Assad, comes in and is like, what the hell are we doing sitting here? Isn't there a trench right over there? Let's go take it. Let's push further and take our country's land back. Our nation's or city's land back. And Fareed's like, no. And Assad's like, look at all these guys. They're just cowards. They're sitting here being cowardly.
It's like, dude.
Why don't we just go? I'm young. I'm gung-ho. I'm ready. I could kill lots of people.
Sure, go do that, but you'll never come back.
Not even that. Fareed's point to him was,
For what?
yeah, look at it out there. It's land. The land out there is irrelevant. Spoilers, this entire story takes place over 1 mile of land. Because at the beginning of the story, he says that he is 10 miles from home. Right? Home is behind him, he's advancing forward. He's 10 miles from home. At the end of the story, when they do all these horrific things and tons of people die to go to the next trench, they're 11 miles from home. And that's when the story ends. At least, you know, that portion of the story. Then we go to Teferi, but irrelevant.
And so think about the gravity of that. Like, that's 1 mile.
All the trauma, all the BS, all the death that they went through, they advanced 1 mile.
How many times have they already done that?
Back and forth, there are trenches all over the place.
And
he
how
said.
many times will they do it going forward?
Yep. I mean, we know there's about 25 years left in the war, maybe a little less, because 69 was what, 5 years after? So, and I said 25, so around, there's like, 19, 20 years left in the war still, and it's been going on for 16 plus years. So yeah, a lot more. They're going to do it a lot more, is the quick answer to your question.
Yeah.
A lot more.
It was rhetorical.
Fair. And yet, and that's what Fareed says to this kid, this child.
Who doesn't belong there because he's a
also,
child.
Also fair. But he says to him, he's like, that land is irrelevant to you. And honestly, to me, what that meant was like, stow your nationalism, right? Stop being like, oh, well, our country and our land, our city, we need to take it back from those evil people. No, you need to live.
Right.
That's your responsibility. Because as Fareed mentions here, we'll get into specifics, but that the emperors are the ones who send millions of their children. He put it as their children, but the emperors send millions of their children.
Because it is their children. They're the ruler. And they clearly are children because they're 14 years old, 15 years old.
Yep.
And so you as a ruler have chosen to send your 14 and 15-year-olds to war, to be slaughtered.
For a mile of land. Less. Or whatever. Like, and what Fareed says is, do you have a cloak? Do you have boots? When we get attacked, you're not going to care about advancing and killing and whatever. You're going to care about, you take your cloak, you take your boots, and you run, because there will be another trench behind you. There might not be another cloak and another pair of boots. And that's when you could get trench foot. That's when you could freeze to death and die. Because, again, at least here in the States, right, you could think, and I know some members of the military, people who are currently veterans or current members of the military as well, so I'm not saying anything negative against anybody who is part of our military, but I know that there are some who will feel that there's a lot of like kind of toxic masculinity involved in military service, whether you agree or disagree with it. I'm just saying. But when you read this story, you read that one section where Fareed and Karak are in their bunk together, and Karak is shivering. And what does Fareed do? He immediately huddles up with Karak, right? There's no information, one way or another, to be fair, letting us know if they are romantically involved. That's irrelevant. They are brothers in war, and one of them is cold. And so you huddle up together for warmth, and there's no... I'm being very kind in the way that I'm trying to say this, but there will be no one who will chastise you for doing something like that, because that's what you need to do in those situations. It's not about... I don't know. It's not about any other silly notions. You're there with another human being, and you're able to help them stay alive. You help them stay alive. And it's not about, let's all rally and go fight and kill.
It's rally so that we can live to the next day.
And
then do it again the next day.
Yeah.
And then do it again the next day.
Yeah.
And do it again the next day.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
The first time I smiled when we read this story was when we heard that Aemon showed up among the reinforcements, the new recruits. Aemon, for folks who don't remember, from the last main story, episode 3, so 2 JaARs ago, but the last main story, episode 3, Eamon was the character at the end who was basically dying on the battlefield. And Teferi, going through as a ghostly form, looking at the different soldiers to try to ascertain where he was in time, to see if he was at the right spot, Eamon notices him and says, "That's death. Death has come for me, and I'm going to die now." And then Teferi, we know it was Teferi, but the ghostly form of Teferi says, "Not yet." Now, what Teferi meant was, it's not time yet. We're not here yet. We have to keep going, or whatever. What Eamon heard was Death standing near Eamon saying, "Not yet. It's not your time. I'm not here for you." And so we find out that Eamon gets to recover and leave a hospital shortly. At some point thereafter.
Yeah. I doubt it was shortly.
No, yeah, exactly. Because he survived. But one of the things that we heard was, in the process, Eamon lost an eye. And so sure enough, in this story, they're like, it's a bunch of young kids and one old grizzled vet with one eye. And later on, Eamon's talking and says, "Hey, my name's Eamon." And I was like, "Oh, it's him." I was like, this is awesome. Although, again, bring it back around, Eamon thought he was going to get to retire from the war because, he was gravely injured and almost died and somehow survived and was able to find the will to live because of some, what essentially it wasn't. We know it wasn't. But what was essentially, a vision, an illusion that he saw of death. That wasn't what it was. We know what it was.
A spectral being.
Yeah. But he saw it as death, and death said not yet, and so he stayed alive. And in this story, he continued to do just that. And so that was awesome. And then we get to the next moment that I loved, where...
Well, before you go to the next thing...
Please, sorry.
In that book, that Viktor Frankl book, he spoke to surviving the concentration camps and kind of what that was like. So he kind of said that it's like you have to come to terms with the fact that someone else is dying because you're surviving. There's a finite number of people that get kept alive each time they decide to go through, or I should say, there was a specific number of people that they decided they were going to kill. And so if you were strong enough, smart enough, whatever, to stay alive, enough for them to pass by you, they were finding someone else to die. So every time you stayed alive, someone else was dying because of it. And that there are lots of aspects of this story that remind me of that book. But I feel like that portion that we just went over reminded me of that part.
Okay, fair enough.
Where it's like, okay, so, you're surviving, but, someone else is gonna die. So, he was in the hospital for a long time, so other people were dying in his place, basically, because he wasn't there. Now he's back, because, again, these people are considered to be expendable, and so
Yeah.
They don't care.
Fair. Yeah. And so then we get to some of the most impactful parts of the story, for sure. Where Fareed, Karak, Eamon, and Iran? Oh, God. I wrote it on the other page, and I was like, I won't need to look back at it. I do. Eman. I was so close. Eman. Go out over the wall. And when I first was starting to read them, like prepping for it, I was like, are they going AWOL? Like, are they abandoning the trench entirely? No. And in fact, Fareed goes and talks to a colonel or something, like a higher up official, who gives him a chit. Amy asked me to correct myself earlier because sometimes it's not clear when I say. That's spelled C-H-I-T. To basically...
Are you saying...
Yeah. So he was given a chit from the colonel, or again, some high-ranking officer, to basically say they are supposed to be outside of the wall. They're on some form of a mission or whatever, even though it's not actually what's going on. Because what they end up doing is they find a somewhat neutral location. It is the body of a fallen thopter. I say body, right? A hull or a whatever of a fallen thopter. And they get inside and they hang a white flag on the outside of the thopter to let facing the opposition, to let the opposition know, hey, come on over, bring a team. We're here to trade things. And the opposition shows up. 4 people from the Argivian forces, because if I didn't say, these guys that we're following in this story are the Falaji, which are the side fighting for Mishra and Mishra's forces against Urza and Tanos' forces. And so the Argivians show up to the Thopter. All 8 people gather together inside of this Thopter hull, and they talk. And they trade items, stories, what have you, kind of all night. Which again, like I said, I don't think the story harps on it a lot, but I noticed it. Why did they do that? Because it's not their war. They don't care. If it was their war, their initial reaction to anyone from the opposition would be, it's our enemy, kill them. But instead, it's just, oh, these are our fellow human beings. We're going to trade items, stories.
In the end, people are people. That's it.
And that's what these people were together.
There are no enemies. There are no evil people taking our land.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just people.
And so Amy asked me to write this quote. It's a very long quote, but it is entirely worth it for me to have written it down. And it took up half a page on a legal pad. But it was, like I said, 100% worth it. So I will read this quote, and then I know you want to talk about it. I'm sure I will have things to add in as well, because it is a very good quote. It's talking about Eamon. So they speak different languages, these two groups. And Eamon seems to be the best at speaking the Argivian language. And otherwise, the rest of them kind of struggle through it back and forth and do the best that they can. Crappy accents, probably missing words here and there, like not being grammatically correct, but you get the gist, right? And so that's how these folks are talking to one another until Eamon starts talking to Laria, who seems to be that other group's leader. Whether that's that she's the leader of a large group back at the trench or not is unclear, but at least of that group of 4, she seems to be the person in charge. So with Eamon talking to Laria, says, many of his teeth were missing, and the scars that webbed out from his ruined eye tugged at the corner of his mouth. But it was a beautiful smile. Laria's quiet laughter was the sound of Farid's mother and sister kneading dough. This moment was good. The war didn't make this moment happen. It happened despite the war. Farid looked from Eamon's broken smile to Laria's graying hair, Karak's gaunt face to the bandaged brow of the Argivian soldier he compared and traded knives with. Farid was not a poet, but the beauty of this moment sat with him. He committed to memory the tragedy of this little piece. Their blood was the ink in which lord and emperors rewrote the borders of the world.
There's so much to say about that, but there's also so little to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to, but we want to.
It speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's so good. You did more than I did, but I absolutely choked up reading that section the first time. It's incredible. And Miguel Lopez has not disappointed once in his writing so far. This one was another level for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, the first tears fell when they said that her laughter was the sound of his sister and mother
Kneading dough. You get images in your mind just from that. Immediately just from that.
This woman who is the enemy
100%. Absolutely.
is just a woman. And when she laughs, you hear your mother and your sister. It's so sad.
Yeah, it's definitely sad. The lines and the story, like that's part of the story, are incredible, but it's very, very sad, for sure. Amazing. And of course, I mean, it's been a while, I think, since we've talked about the title of a story. Some of them have been more poignant than others, and sometimes I truly just forget. So I do apologize for that. But the part that got me was their blood was the ink in which lord and emperors rewrote the borders of the world. That's incredible. And the fact that this story is called The Ink of Empires, right? That's exactly, I want to make sure I have the exact name right. Oh god. The Ink of Empires, yeah. Yeah. Like, how incredible is that?
Yeah. When you look at a map, every line that's drawn on that map is there because somebody died to make it happen.
And almost always a lot of somebody's died.
Yeah.
A lot of somebody's. For sure. Yeah.
And how important is that line?
To 99.99% of people, not at all.
Right.
And that's exactly what Farid's point was to Assad. Go ahead, it's a mile. Means nothing.
Right.
It means nothing. Your life is what matters.
Right.
Not that 1 mile of, I mean, just desolate, destroyed nothingness.
Right.
But it's
how many lives are gone
for 1
for
mile.
for that line to be drawn slightly to the right or slightly to the left on that map?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
It's the absolute dumbest shit.
Yeah, yeah.
The absolute dumbest shit.
And so that brings us to the next quote, by the way, because Farid is still trying, right? He's still holding out hope. He's still doing what he can. And so it says, so the he referenced here is Farid. All he could do was refuse to be ink and try to save the ones that could still be pulled out from the night. And that, I guess, was around the time where he decided to tell the Argothians, right? Argothians? Argivians. Not Argothians. That's a different thing. The Argivians that an attack was coming soon. And Karak says to him, he's like, we're going to be hung for treason for you telling them this. And he's like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I have to. Because he looked around and felt those moments, saw those things. Like you said, realized that they were just people. Just like him. 4 other people.
Yeah. And why does he get to live and they don't?
Right. And so he warned them. And sure enough, what did they do? Just what Farid had told Assad needed to be done. They took their stuff and they left. Because it didn't matter. It didn't. It did not matter. And the whole time, again, Miguel did an amazing job. The whole time we were reading the section of the story where our 4 main characters, basically, the 4 that I mentioned, are about to climb over during the actual fight portion, I was terrified.
Yeah.
Because again, they're words on a page, right? They don't actually exist. But people that did that exact thing absolutely did exist.
Right.
And I didn't want to read about these 4 people, any of those 4 people, or any people, to be fair, dying by being forced to go over the wall because their commanding officer is standing behind them saying, rah, rah, do this for your country. And by the way, if you don't do this for your country, I'm going to stab you to death, right? Basically what he said was, I will make sure that you taste steel, right, from our city. Our city's steel. Because you won't risk your life by climbing over that and fighting robots and bombs and like...
Yeah. It's
which
disgusting.
Which you can't fight. They have spears, like...
Actually disgusting.
So...
Yeah.
And honestly, to add to the nonsense of it, when the Falaji do get into that other trench, it's basically identical to the one they just left.
Yeah, they're all gonna be.
But what I'm saying is, it's identical. They just moved a mile, but are still in the same shit.
Well, now they're in worse shit.
They're further from home and closer to the enemy?
Well, and everything they lost in that mile.
Sure. Literally and figuratively.
Right.
Yeah.
Emotionally and physically.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I have an overarching question at the end, but we're not quite there yet. Are you good? Mm-hmm. Okay. We hear about Teferi, right? We get to the Teferi section at the end.
Okay. Well, you never brought up the line that you said you were going to bring up before about how the people were expendable.
I thought I did bring that up. I didn't? Okay. My bad.
Maybe you didn't.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I don't know if you wrote it down.
Of course, yeah. Because we were talking about the emperors. So I sort of brought it up where it mentions that the land is so enticing to the emperors that they send millions to, quote, fuel the knight's appetite, which was now indistinguishable from their own. Meaning that, the knight is just going to eat all these people up and they're just going to die. And the emperors are going to try to eat up all this land, and it's exactly the same thing. Right. Like, it might as well just be the emperors saying, run into that saw blade over and over and over again until I have enough land to make me feel satisfied in some capacity. That's literally all it is. Oh, we don't have enough people? Go get 1 million more. Okay, all those 1 million are gone, go get 1 million more. That's all. Yeah. That's all it is, over and over again. So yeah,
when
go
you
ahead.
run out of all the adults, bring all the kids.
14 and 15 years old. And it shows, because that kid doesn't get any of it.
No.
He's just like, well, why don't we just go? Come on. What are we waiting for? And some of the other kids who are with him are like, yeah, let's do it. It's like, you don't get it, dude. You just don't get it. It's not worth it. One mile of land by the end. That's all it is. And honestly, that land is trash now. Like, it's been shelled, it's been bombed. In fact, there was that amazing moment. I don't know why I didn't write anything down about this. When Fareed is talking to Assad, he reaches into the wall. He pulls it in the wall of the trench, and he pulls out a bone that's still got a shred of cloth on it. And he throws it on the ground. And he says, those are, basically, right, not a quote.
That used to be a person.
But he says, there's human remains. Tell me what side they were on. What side did they fight for? Even with the tatters of cloth on.
Doesn't matter. They're dead.
Yep. And that's when he said, like, every trench is going to be exactly like that. Reach in the wall, you're going to find somebody's bones. Hey, guess what? Teferi's in this story. We actually get some information. We finally hear definitively what Teferi is looking for. We could have assumed it, but we didn't know it definitively. And so now they definitively tell us Teferi has been jumping through time looking for the last battle, with L and B capitalized there for last battle. The last battle. In Argoth. And so every time that he is showing up, checking on the battlefield or whatever, he's looking for whether he's at that last battle or not, and then saying, oh, we're too early, we're too late, go back, go forward, whatever it is, to try to then recalibrate and try to find it. And we find out how he's doing that, and that's a quote that you asked me to write down. So the next quote that we have is that Teferi is looking in areas of blotted time. And so it says, blotted time looked to Teferi like holes chewed in a hanging curtain or stars in the night sky. Its cause was great death, the infinite possibilities of all those lives ending in a moment, taking with them a piece of the great tapestry of time. It's really awesome. I liked that line a lot.
Yeah.
Really awesome.
It's not just a piece either. It's like well, he kind of said it, but it's like a piece that then leads to a whole strand.
The infinite possibilities, yeah.
And all of it's gone. Because the strand never got to exist.
Yeah.
Because the piece was stolen.
Yeah.
That's what it's like every time somebody dies. One person.
Let alone hundreds, thousands, millions. Yeah.
And yet it's all about drawing that line on that map. One
Just
mile
that-
further away.
Yeah, that little bit further, for sure, for sure.
All it makes you want to do is just flip the biggest bird
Yeah.
at anyone who thought that that made sense.
And so, the question that I take away from this story, and that makes me reflect back on the other stories as well, and we're not done, right? This is 4 of 5 of the main stories, and we've also only done 2 of 5 of the side stories. So next time and the time after, we have side story 3 and 4. Why would I say 3 and 5? You fool. Go in order. 3 and 4. Then we'll have main story 5 and then side story 5, just so you know what we're doing. But my question that I want to ask, in addition to giving us your opinions on literally anything that we talked about, anything at all, and I'll ask you as well, Amy, because I'm genuinely struggling with this for myself, because I don't know what the answer is. Each one of these stories, I feel like, has been amazing and awful at the same time, and for different reasons, right? It's amazing because it's super well written, it's an incredible story, it's compelling, it's amazing to read and to listen to, and etc. But it's also awful because it's just devastating to read about, to think about, etc. And
it's about war.
I was gonna say, so please don't misunderstand. I'm not sitting here going, I don't want to be sad. Like, no. Good stories can be sad just as much as happy, or just as much as good stories can be happy. What I want to know is there an element of escapism that people wish to have with these magic stories that gets taken away when they are of this style, of this type of subject matter?
Sure.
Because, not for nothing, maybe I just had weird expectations, but I feel like the tone of these stories came out of nowhere for me. Like, I get that it talks about war, so maybe I should have figured it out, that the set's called The Brothers' War, and maybe I was spoiled because the last set that had war in it, I was angry at the stories for a different reason, for War of the Spark. And I'm not saying that I'm angry at these stories. I am conflicted when it comes to these stories. Because this story was so depressing in the beginning. So depressing. And so, honestly, I don't think I would have faulted a single person for getting partway through the story and going, I can't read this. They miss out by not doing that, for sure. But I don't blame them. It's a lot. This story is heavy as hell.
And sometimes you're just not ready.
For sure.
One of our loyal viewers has said, I don't really watch JaAR when you guys film it. Because it's a lot. And I just can't do it. Fine.
Yeah, I don't blame you. We talk about heavy stuff.
Sorry.
Because the stories do.
And to me, that's what a good story is. A story that tells the truth. Doesn't try to be better than what the world actually is. It tells the truth. Because that's how you identify with a story. That's how it means something.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess, it's interesting, right? I asked the question of, like, is it too much? But I would imagine, I guess, that people who thought that the story was too much probably would have thought our descriptions for this episode were too much, and probably would have left long before I asked that question. So maybe, maybe I won't get answers of people agreeing that it might be too much.
Well, that's the thing. It is too much. It is too much. And that's why it needs to be written. And because we need to sit here and cry as we're fucking talking about it.
Yeah.
Because all these fucking people died.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are fictional people, but their situation
But they're not.
Their situation ain't fictional. It's not. It's not fictional at all. And we've talked about that before with other uncomfortable topics of discrimination or racism or what have you. self-harm and things like that. We've talked about all of that with these stories. It's real. It's a real thing. And while it's in a fantasy setting, right, like I said, they're big mechs running around on the battlefield and shooting off bombs and things like that. It's not that far off. It's really not.
Yeah. This was not going to be the movie Transformers. This was going to be war. That's
ironic. I don't think you even know that the mechs in this set have alternate Transformers variants. Amy didn't know that yet, everybody. So there we go.
Stupid. Remember how I said war was dumb? That's dumb. No, I'm just kidding. There's nothing more dumb than war. Nothing.
Got him.
That's not a got him.
I know.
Again, that's just telling the truth.
I get it. Trust me. So yeah, I want to know people's thoughts. I truly do. If you need to take a bit, I get it. We're going to go and spend some quality time together and watch something fun or get ready for bed. One of the two. But
or maybe drink some hot chocolate.
Ooh, that sounds good. I'm down. So yeah, whatever it happens to be, whatever you can do for self-care and for comfort, please always, or never hesitate to do that, I should say.
Or always remember to do it.
Yeah, sure.
Because that tends to be something that people forget. After something like this, if it's really tough for you, just remember the self-care half. And it really is that half. It's not a 16th, it's a half.
Yeah. So, honestly, not for nothing, if you watched this on Thursday, I didn't do this on purpose, I promise, so please don't hate me. If you watched this on Thursday when it came out, come join us on stream. Let us know that you just finished this. Let us know how you're doing. Check in with us. Check in with your fellow viewers. I'm sure it's going to be tons of fun, even if I'm being salty because we're drawing our millionth land in a row. Thanks, Arena. Happens all the time. Come join in my misery. But it will not be misery. It will be a ton of fun. We look forward to that immensely. If you missed it and it's after the fact, don't forget to check out the VOD. But regardless, thank you so much for being here. We hope that you enjoyed this video. Being able to sit here and cry. I said I did it before because I did when we were reading the story. I tried to keep it contained here, not for any other reason than because, I wanted to keep the conversation going. And thank you for sharing your emotions with us, because that's important. And I think that's a great way for all of you to join us as we show off our
#Vorthos Pride.
That's right. Like I said, please don't hesitate to join us for the stream. Don't forget, while you're on this channel or any of our channels, links down in the description box below, to subscribe and ring that bell so that you will get those notifications whenever we go live on this channel and or whenever we put out a new video on this channel or Video Games for All or Gluten Free for All. 3 new videos a week on Video Games for All, 1 new video a month on Gluten Free for All, 2 videos last month on Gluten Free for All.
Yeah.
So,
I just wanted to say,
please.
With Miguel Lopez saying #Vorthos Pride is easy.
Yeah, these are great.
And I want to keep that fist up longer.
Yeah. So, shout outs to him. Amazing work. We will see you for the next one, which will be side stories, and Reinhardt Suarez has done an amazing job as well. So we will be back for side story 3 and then 4 next week, so stay tuned for that. We have pre-release content coming up this weekend, so we are going to do our best to make sure that there's a JaAR for Monday. If there's not, we will have it for Thursday, and we will keep going from there. But we will do our best to still get 2 out a week. We'll see what we can do. We got a lot of content coming out for Brothers War, so stay tuned no matter what. Thank you for being here and supporting us. Don't forget, likes and shares go a very long way. So if that's something that you're willing to do to help us out, we really, really appreciate any and all support that you are willing to give. But for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.